Well, welcome to another episode of the Power Lunch. Today we have a very special guest here, someone who's grown to be near and dear to my heart, a brother from another mother, Russell Hopkinson. Our time together has been short, but I think that it's been very fruitful, Russell. I've enjoyed getting to know you and working with you and your incredible depth and breadth of knowledge, some of which you're about to share with us today. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, who you are, misdemeanors, no felonies. Then talk to us a little bit about maybe how it came to be, and then some of your experiences, and then we'll get into a discussion about virtual desktop VDI. So
sure.
Have at it.
Thank you for the warm welcome, Keith. It's going to be tough fitting my head out of the doorway here after all that, but some of it's actually true. Thank you very much. I've been doing IT for over 3 decades now, which kind of gives you an idea of my age.
What's wrong with you?
I know, you just don't learn.
I take that back. I thought you were way smarter, man.
Nope. So started off doing programming, then got into various directorial positions with other private companies. After a while of doing that, decided to go out on my own, living down in South Florida, and started eventually my own business, which I ran for 15 years before I met you, Keith, and decided I like you guys so much, I just don't want to do this anymore. I'd rather do it with you guys. And we are now one big happy NetVPro family. But during that whole 3-decade tenure, I did the gamut of IT, from complex storage installations to all sorts of managed services, and up to things like VDI that we're going to be talking about today. So dealt with clients as small as 2 individuals and as large as 260 person firms. So got a bit of experience in the very, very small to medium-sized business space. I wouldn't even call it medium; it's just small. But really, that's where my experience comes from. Certifications in Microsoft, VMware. Yep. So
I always kind of had the feeling that you were, if not certified, at least certifiable. So
yep, my wife would tell you the same thing. So
anyway, well, thanks. It's great to have you here. Maybe let's start at the beginning, because we kind of have probably a soup to nuts type of an audience. So maybe start a little bit at a high level. What is VDI, and we can get into a little bit of that, and then we can talk a little bit more granular. But so from a high level, how would you describe or talk about VDI?
Let's get the acronym out of the way first. VDI stands for Virtual Desktop Infrastructure, which is basically just that. It's the infrastructure to maintain, develop, and support what are called virtual desktops. And a virtual desktop is simply a desktop that exists in a cloud-based location, either a private cloud or a public cloud. And typical to the desktop that you would normally walk up to and sign in, that you can kind of reach out, put your hands on the hard drive, and tweak the power button, things like that. It's the same exact user experience, at least the one that we strive to produce, but it's got a lot of benefits in terms of management, security, things like that, and is also, again, housed in typically a very secure data center. So you don't have to worry about somebody breaking into the office, stealing a PC and making off with loads of data. So that basically, in a nutshell, is what we talk about when we mention VDI.
And I know there's probably several, but have you worked with a couple different technologies? I know there's the big 800-pound gorilla in the room, and there's probably a 750-pound chimp. Which, have you maybe talk about those just a little bit?
Yeah, basically the 2 main players in the VDI space are obviously Microsoft's Hyper-V and VMware's Horizon View. I've camped squarely in the VMware space, have since day one. Am I familiar with the Hyper-V product? Yes. Do I like the VMware product better? Yes, I do. So yeah, that's kind of where I am with that. And it probably also should be mentioned that even within the context of VDI, there are 2 separate nuances of it, for lack of a better term, that we can address. Number one is typical company wants to build out their own virtual desktop infrastructure. So they buy all the servers, they buy the licenses for Horizon and VMware and all that stuff, and they basically roll their own. They can do it either on premise or, again, preferably in a secure data center.
I'm gonna interject here. We get a double word score and Jeopardy for using the phraseology "roll your own" during the power lunch. So thank you for that. Very good, sir. That's right. 1 point with me. Very good.
The second iteration of VDI, which is extremely popular, especially with the very small organizations like under 100 users, is the DaaS, and that's another acronym, DaaS, which stands for Desktop as a Service, where basically they subscribe to desktops as they need them or as they don't. So as their organization increases or decreases in size, they basically pay for only the desktops that they're using. And this model tends to, like I said, be very popular with the smaller organizations, which really don't have the initial upfront desire to spend the upfront costs associated with developing their own VDI, and probably don't have the internal technical experience and proficiency to do that correctly.
Do you have experience with the DaaS, implementing a DaaS model for?
Oh yeah, yeah. We've got several clients and hundreds of desktops that sit in DaaS type environments right now.
What type of what type of businesses use that? Because so let me step back. When you're doing that, what does that look like? In other words, do they need to have a user interface device plus the DaaS implementation, or what does that kind of, why would a business make that decision a little bit?
Well, let me take a case study of one client who initially ran their own on-premise solution, eventually moved to a remote desktop type solution using Microsoft's RDP protocol, and then eventually made the decision to move into a full-scale VDI development. This was a law firm that basically started out literally as a mom and pop organization. It was a guy and his wife running a firm out of this little office in Lake Worth. And they soon started to add employees. And as they got up to about 20 employees, then they realized that there was a significant need to be able to access those systems remotely. So we helped them implement and secure a remote desktop environment. They fell basically into the foreclosure market, which came along with a whole bunch of regulations and requirements that they had to meet. They soon realized that the management of that firm, which had now grown to about 100 individuals, was a behemoth to maintain that type of security and stringent controls on it. So we went ahead, recommended the virtual desktop environment, and that basically addressed all of their security and scalability and management concerns, and impressed the heck out of the auditors when they came in and were expecting to find issues left and right, and walked out of the room or the meeting, basically asking us to find something for them that they could take back and report, because the system, in their words, was just so tightened down that they were really impressed by it. So it was a knockout of the park for that client.
So in a past life, I kind of had a similar situation where we had both HIPAA requirements and PCI requirements, different business units, but from a technical perspective, I had to deal with both types of requirements. And we had a relatively large VDI implementation, and that allowed us to, like you said, enforce the security across the VDI infrastructure. But then also from a security perspective, the endpoint, so the user interface device, I was able to use a lower end or less expensive, less robust laptop that was locked down, so there was no data on that endpoint. Is that similar in your experience, or to what those people did? Did they lock down that user interface device, or were they using some other type of device for that user interface to the VDI infrastructure?
Yeah, obviously, when we rolled out the VDI to begin with, we're talking about a company that had probably 100 different desktop machines there, and they really didn't want to have to throw away that investment simply because they were going to a hosted solution. So what we were able to do with those devices is we basically just downloaded and installed the free VMware Horizon View client software, which did nothing but allow them to connect to their hosted desktop. We also obviously put in controls, like you said, that disabled the ability to store data or transfer data to their local machines, disabled all sorts of local storage like USB devices, things like that, so that they really didn't have the issue of being able to have corporate data on their local machine. And again, with the requirement, and with a lot of the requirements being that they have to have desktop encrypted desktops or endpoints, for example, to your HIPAA example there, that really goes a long way toward solving that without forcing an organization to buy and implement and maintain desktop-based or endpoint-based encryption, because it's all handled again in a data center and central policies and everything like that. We also, as they grew and as they outgrew their desktops, instead of buying new PCs for them, we actually bought, there's two other types of lower end machines. Many people are familiar with thin clients, which is this kind of a dumbed down version of a PC. We actually implemented what are called zero clients for them, which, as I like to kid around, I think Sheila's heard me say this before, they're dumb as a box of hair without a server to connect to. Mm-hmm. And those are very, very low cost clients. I mean, new at the time, we were paying about $350 a box for those. And one of the other beauty is there's no hard drive, there's no moving parts, there's almost nothing to fail short of a lightning strike to the device. They just sit there and crank and last forever and are very, very inexpensive to maintain.
Do you mind, or do you remember what those were, what the brand was?
Yep, those were HP T310 devices that we were using. I think they may even still make those, but regardless, I know that HP makes a comparable zero client now.
Yeah, it seems like I remember. Is Tenzig? Was there a Tenzig for a while? I can't remember.
Tenzig was another manufacturer. We did not have good experience with them. We tried them. We tried Wise boxes, and for us, HP was the most solid offering at the time.
In my past life, we actually we used refurbished Dell laptops. So instead of buying the news, we bought older refurbished ones, like you said, completely locked them down, and we actually encrypted that endpoint. I mean, because if you think about the HIPAA space, if you have and you can prove that you have the endpoints encrypted, that's kind of a get out of jail free pass. So but that VDI thing, the other part about that, so we've talked about the flexibility and security. Maybe talk a little bit about the benefits of being able to do backup. I mean, that was one of the things that I really liked about it, was the backup stuff. So can you talk to that a little bit?
Sure. And the way that we basically backed everything up in a VDI environment is we used basically personalities to section off the data. So none of the user data was stored on the actual virtual desktops. They were very generic. We used a minimum number of what are called pools, or desktop pools, to basically differentiate different organizational units. So for example, the finance pool may have certain applications stored on those virtual desktops that most other users don't need. The sales desktops may have certain specific applications that are not needed on others. So we would just create, organizational and work group specific pools to handle those applications. So from a backup perspective, backing up was great, because we basically we backed up the data that was stored on the file servers, associated with the user profiles. Obviously, all the centralized data was backed up on those servers. As far as the desktops were concerned, there was really no need to back up the desktops themselves. We backed up the templates, which were used to recompose the desktops. But in a worst case scenario, if somebody just completely got in, hosed their desktop, just deleted a gamut of files, or got infected with the worst type, kind of malware you could possibly imagine, the recourse was, okay, log off will basically recompose your desktop, which typically took about 15 minutes. and their desktop is immediately back up and running to the point where it was before they did anything that day. Also makes doing updates a lot easier because you're only updating one template. And then once that template's updated and tested and you can do all that behind the scenes, at that point in time, you can say, okay, we're ready to roll out this new iteration or version of the desktops, and bang, you can smack out 260 desktops in about 2 hours.
Could you, as long as we're kind of on this subject a little bit, could you talk a little about persistence versus non-persistent?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, you're referring to two types of hosted desktops. Persistent means that the desktop state is persistent across reboots and recomposition. Very similar to how a traditional desktop situation is on premise, with the notable difference of it exists in a cloud and in a virtual environment. A non-persistent desktop, when the user logs off or the desktop is restarted, it reverts back automatically to the condition it was before the user logged in that day. So it's not subject to change. As if somebody installs an application today, when they go ahead and log back in tomorrow, that application is not going to be there, which has benefits and drawbacks based on the type of environment that we're looking at.
Yeah, you might say, well, why would you use that? And in a past life, as I mentioned with the VDI implementation, we had both persistent and non-persistent desktops. And the non-persistent desktops I used in a call center space. So I had a couple hundred agents in a call center, and we just had non-persistent desktops. So whatever they did during the day, we would blow it away, and then they would get a clean install or a clean image, I guess, the next day when they came into work or when they would log in again. Just because, like I said, you kind of think about a call center as an assembly line type of a thing.
Yep.
They don't require that. The thing I liked about it too was from a, I guess, business continuation perspective. We had several business intelligence people who were also on the VDI infrastructure, and I guess it's come repetitive to say VDI infrastructure, but they're on our VDI environment. And part of the piece I liked about that was being able to back up their data, because they would have these big data sets and they're doing things that were important. And if you think about in today's world, if someone does that locally on their machine, right, on their workstation, and that machine corrupts somehow, or they drop it in a bathtub, whatever happens to it, whatever weirdness occurs, that information can be lost. But in the whole VDI world, you have the ability to back up those important machines from that perspective, and also from if an employee were to turn evil. If an employee knows that they're going to quit and they turn evil, and all of a sudden they eliminate all of their data, if you have that, or if you have access to that, you have an opportunity to retain that data. So there's a lot of benefit there as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Right. Maybe talk a little bit about resource allocation, and with the VDI implementation, do you have the ability to grant certain pools or certain machines, virtual machines within a pool, the ability to have more capability? So RAM, disk, those types of things. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, basically in a desktop pool, every single virtual desktop in that pool has the same configuration. So for example, if you have your finance team, which needs 8 gig of usable RAM on their desktops, and they need a 100 gig local C drive for storing temporary Excel spreadsheets or something like that, you can have that maintained separately than your typical knowledge worker pool, or even your reception individuals pool there, which may need just 4 gig of RAM or so. Not much of anything in terms of disk storage. Not much in terms of compute or CPU cycles. So yeah, you can certainly customize the differences on the virtual desktops, but each of the desktops in a specific pool has the same feature set. Because again, you want to be able to just to recustomize or redeploy that entire pool from one image. And to do so, you would need to make sure that all those machines have the same configuration.
Right. Out of curiosity, and I don't know that I was ever, can you designate that by time of day? Can you make those machines dynamic by time of day? So for an example, one of the things that I had occur in my environment was, so we had these business intelligence people, right? And they would run large, meaningful queries across our whole environment. A lot of columns involved, and the IOPS would be significant, and the draw on our production environments. So in other words, what we would do is we would give them a lesser environment, a lesser pool. Well, we would give them a standard pool during the working day, but then in the evening, if they had a big project, we would allocate more resources to them because more resources were available. All right, we would kind of protect the production environment. Now, my recollection is that we had to do that manually. We would have to allocate, they would come to us, give us a help desk request. We'd allocate more resources and make the change manually. Do you know if there's a way to do that dynamically on the fly?
The way you did it is certainly manual. It's a manual process and not one that I would necessarily advocate. May have worked well for you, but the way we would get around that is we would just create we would give users access to two separate pools, and we would make one pool available to them, the standard desktop knowledge worker pool during the day. And then, after, in a certain other time, they would also be allowed to log into their, to the power user pool, if you will, and just.
Right. Can you isolate that power worker pool to a certain, like they can't log into it before 5 p.m. Can you get that granular with it? Even though you have two pools, can you say this pool is only active during this particular time or available?
We can set policies both at the user and computer level to allow or disallow access based on time of day.
That's pretty cool. All right. We've talked a lot, and I guess I just want to throw it out there and see if anybody has any questions or thoughts or anything like that. I'll throw it to the floor a little bit. Any questions for Russell?
Yeah, I'll come up with questions.
Kenneth.
I'm assuming this can be in the cloud or in their data center. Like the desktop could be a cloud connection or more local.
Yeah, they can actually have it in public cloud like an AWS or Azure. They can do it in a privately hosted cloud like what NetVPro offers. And they can also, if they choose again to invest up front in the infrastructure, the servers, the switches, equipment, all that, they could theoretically put this even locally in their office, or again, preferably in their own data center if they host space or if they contract for space in the data center.
Mm-hmm. And is it much like a regular VM? It doesn't care what hardware it's running on, kind of thing?
I don't know that I would ever say that VMs don't care what hardware. The hypervisor cares what hardware it runs on. The VMs really don't. So yeah, as long as you've got VMware approved, as long as it's on for example, VMware, as long as it's on their HCL or their hardware compatibility list, in terms of the hardware, yeah, you can run whatever you want on that. And there are specifications for both VDI and just standard server-based VMs. But yeah, it's totally agnostic, and that's what the job of the hypervisor is to maintain that indiscrimination on hardware or abstraction, if you will.
In a previous life, we were exploring something like this, I want to say 15 years ago, and it was an HP device. And the really cool thing about it was we could put these terminals all over the company, and you had basically like a credit card type thing that you just walked up to any terminal, plugged it in, boom, and your desktop came up.
Yep.
I don't know if they still do that, but I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, that's smart card authentication, and they still have that. Yeah, and there's all sorts of biometrics. You can walk up now and just scan your fingerprint, and it'll log you into. And then there's always the traditional, keyboard and mouse attached that
Right.
you're going to use anyway. So,
True.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, I will ask mine. Russell, do you have, and I know this isn't necessarily like, we don't want to just push one brand over another, but let me cage this another way. I know what my answer is to this question, which I will share, but I'm wondering if you have a preferred hardware platform for the host and why that might be preferred.
it would depend. That the answer to that question, I can safely say, depends on what the use case is, how many users we're talking about. Do we want to look at, like a VX block for these huge deployments of multi-thousands of machines? Are we looking for, a dozen individuals, a couple hundred individuals? It varies based on, how many users and what type of environment we're looking to architect.
Is there something to contemplate when one is thinking about or is considering VDI or a VDI implementation? Is there something, are there things about the hardware, the host hardware, that one should think about?
Again, the main thing is making sure that whatever hardware you select is on the VMware or in the manufacturer's, in the hypervisor's hardware compatibility list. Because the last place you want to be is doing this huge scale deployment, spending a whole bunch of, in terms of hardware and software licenses, and find out that you've got a problem, and the hypervisor manufacturer just throws their arms up and says, sorry, we can't help you.
Well, and that's a great point, because go ahead, Ken.
Is there a cost point or number of user points where it decides whether you're going to go VDI or you're going to stay on the traditional systems?
It doesn't really, and typically we tell people don't consider VDI for, as a cost savings measure, at least in terms of your hardware and software, because you're initially going to be spending more, obviously, on the infrastructure to support multiple desktops. However, the benefits from a management perspective, in terms of being able to manage 100 desktops with literally a couple clicks of a mouse, is really, really appealing. So again, it's really, what you're going into VDI for. Is it to take some load off of your system admins and architects? In that case, yes, VDI should be something you really want to consider. Is it, oh my gosh, we're spending too much on workstations and servers, and we want to cut that down? You're going to spend a lot to get into VDI, again, unless you go with kind of like a DaaS implementation where there's zero upfront cost and you just pay as you go.
Okay. Is there a I forgot.
Well,
I had a good question.
I'll jump in and maybe you could think of it. So Russell, one of the things I used to like was Cisco made UCS server, and I used to like those because we could pack the RAM like crazy into those. We were a RAM heavy environment, and being able to, and they seemed like the UCS equipment had more capacity for RAM than others did, and that was one of the things that I really needed to have. So that was kind of the thrust of my question, was about that. And I think that you brought up a great point, and that is, like, if you're exploring VDI and you talk to vendors and stuff, and a lot of times they're like, make it seem like a completely kind of a ubiquitous environment. You just throw it up there and stuff happens and magic occurs and things like that. But you do want to make sure that you're paying attention to the compatibility, because there can be incompatibilities that you need to pay attention to, and not only on the hardware or the host side, but even down to the type of RAM you use and stuff like that you can run into incompatibility. So that is something that you want to be sensitive to. Maybe you can talk to that a little bit, or either agree or disagree, tell me I'm an idiot, whatever.
No, for sure. And in fact, as much as I hate the aged mantra of nobody ever got fired for buying Cisco, we had fantastic experiences with the Cisco UCS platform. They're, like you said, they're incredibly dense. You can pack just everything into them. We had servers that basically came out into production loaded with 512 gig of RAM, which at the time was just like, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. Today it's just like, oh dude, you only got 512 gig of RAM. But yeah, those devices were absolutely fantastic.
Yep.
So, and
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
that-
what was the second part that you were asking there, Keith? Sorry, you got me on Cisco, my bad.
Yeah, I can't remember. I was so taken with the system.
I remember mine.
Okay, yeah, Ken, take it away, Ken.
What percent of the market do you see currently at a VDI solution?
Utilization or
Yeah.
potential? I'm gonna preface this answer with I don't know.
Okay.
But if you
Fair.
asked me to come up with a number, I would say true VDI, I would say we would probably be looking at somewhere around the 7 to 8% of organizations out there have this deployed and utilized
So a
right
lot
now.
of room for growth.
Absolutely, yeah. And most people don't even know, are even familiar with the concept. And as soon as you mention cloud, people are like, well, I don't want cloud, but like I said, as soon as they see some of the benefits associated with this in terms of security, management, scalability, for your large organizations, it's almost a no-brainer.
How would you see this, and kind of in the same vein, how would you see the split between VMware and Microsoft? Like market, like 60-40, 70-30?
VMware certainly has the lion's share of the
Yeah.
VDI deployment.
I haven't personally run Hyper-V environment or deployment, but I've heard more positive things recently than I have in the past about the Microsoft tool, that they've really improved it.
They have. They've done a really good job from the days when Hyper-V was originally released. They had a lot of issues with it. They've certainly determined that they are going to invest in this and mature it. It is a much more mature product today than it was even 5-10 years ago. If you asked, I would say Hyper-V would be a more attractive option for your very, very small organizations. And then, as somebody maybe gets past the 25 user level or something like that, VMware might be a better option for them. Although we have great success in terms of deployment and cost effectiveness, pushing out VMware hypervisors to very, very small organizations, like with just a handful of employees.
No, this wasn't for me, I'm just gonna take a step back. Paul and I did a skunkworks project in a past life, and we actually built a test environment, and we ran Hyper-V side by side with VMware. Now, it wasn't VDI, it was just virtualization. But one of the things that we found in a measured way was that there was much more density in the VMware environment than in the Microsoft environment. We did the skunkworks test, we documented it. To be honest, we put a little bit of information out there on the internet, and then we were kindly asked to take it off. But it was interesting to me to see, like you said, you kind of had, when you did the numbers, the VMware piece, kind of was more expensive from an initial, what is the dollar amount? But when you took the fact that you could get more density into a smaller space, it was actually less expensive from that perspective. You could get more horsepower out of that environment. So kind of interesting thing. But yeah, and I've understood that they've kind of closed the gap in that a little bit, but I just kind of wondering if there's a sense of how much they've closed the gap.
Yeah, and being a VMware partner and a Microsoft partner, I'm really glad that you went out on a limb and said that. And although I'm not going to categorically say that I'm not going to confirm that, you're pretty accurate there in your assessment.
Yeah, I
Is
mean,
the Hyper-V product baked in, like a lot of Microsoft did a lot of things, like RDP is already in the server. So I don't know, is Hyper-V something an add-on to a server? Or is that something more that comes with it?
No, in the Microsoft environment, Hyper-V is a role that's assigned to a server.
Okay.
So basically just like, file and print or anything like that. So you can assign that role, and then, because it's Microsoft, they've made the licensing requirements for people hosting on their Hyper-V platform a little less stringent and initially at least costly than hosting their products on a VMware platform.
Right. Okay.
Got a good question here from Denny, and it has to do with people working off-site, so remote workers using VDI. What types of precautions do you recommend? I'm gonna embellish on his question. Number one is, what precautions do you recommend having in place for off-site workers, remote workers using VDI? Number one. Number two is talk a little bit about the ability to use dual screens and voice and video over the VDI, over the wire.
Sure. That makes me wish that I had really joined this Zoom meeting on my virtual desktop rather than on my local desktop, but I just really want to make sure that we didn't have any issues in terms of quality. But just to show and be able to say at this point in time, see, look how good this is. But it actually works really good. I do a lot of Zoom meetings, a lot of video conferencing from my hosted desktop, because I want my applications there. I want to be able to get to information that I need from that meeting. So that's certainly viable. With regard to precautions, first knee-jerk reflex answer that's going to come out of my mouth. And also, thank you, Denny, for asking this question, because we didn't even address the whole benefit of remote use on this. But from the precautions, far and away, MFA. You have to do multi-factor authentication. We will tell organizations, typically, if you have secured internal environments like an office space that's got physical security on it, you can relax the MFA portion, if you're not required to do that for people logging into a hosted desktop from within your office. And we have several clients that do that. But for everyone that logs in remotely to a hosted desktop, you have to have MFA. Now, that's just one layer, obviously, of the security onion there. Obviously, the more layers you put in, the more secure your environment's going to be, or less attractive it's going to be for other individuals. So, to the extent that you can lock down access for only certain countries or geographical areas or even IPs, all the better. So there are a lot of safeguards, a lot of security that you can put into place to protect, especially in a remote worker environment.
Cool. Very good. Are there any other questions? I see we're kind of getting towards the end on time. Are there any other questions we want to make sure we get in for Russell?
I'm good.
Hearing none, I'll ask Russell, do you have any thoughts or anything else you wanted to get in before we, I see Piper has left. I was wondering if we're going to be doing the wheel of fun and excitement. There she is. Are we doing the wheel of death today? I mean, fun and excitement?
Fun and excitement. Yes, we are.
All right. So Russell, if you don't have anything else, we can segue into Piper and the wheel of happiness and jocularity.
Is this for a 10-day cruise?
Yes, for a 10-day foot-long Subway sandwich. An ever-loving gobstopper Subway.
Keith, if you're able to give me permission to share my screen.
Yeah, we can do that. And
there we go. This opportunity just to offer a shameless plug that if you are interested in further information about VDI or its risks or rewards, feel free to contact your friendly NetVPro associate.
Wow, I'm glad we got that
really
recorded.
funny.
That's going to show up on LinkedIn, that right there. All right. Piper, are you with us? If you are, it looks like you've taken your invisibility pill. There she is.
Hi.
Hi. And it sounds like we have some contributors at Piper's house.
Well, if you hear snoring, my dog just came in the room.
Junior, nice. Are you able to do the Wheel of Fun and Adventure, or would you like for me to try it? Piper. She must not hear us, so I will attempt the Wheel of Fun. I think we have 3 people participating with that. Are you guys able to see my screen?
Thank you.
Yes.
We have longtime winners, Denny and Raj, and I think Ken's actually won a couple times. So let's see who gets to have fun at the buffet. Do you guys like that graphic, by the way? The Wheel of Happiness graphic there in the center?
Oh, yeah.
Let's see who we got. The winner. Oh! And Raj.
Again!
Raj.
For a long spell, so.
Raj wrestles the championship belt away from Denny for today in the Wheel of Fun and Adventures.